Black Bolt and White Flare are only about 2 weeks away from wide release. A black and white set that we are inexplicably getting at the end of Scarlet and Violet. Why, you ask? I may be peppering in some speculation throughout this video, but the main thing I want to talk about is the major collectible draw to this set. When the set was announced on this channel, I said the Pokemon Company is going to have to do something incredible that they've never done before with this set if they want to get anywhere near the hype that 151 had. And they have. This is a Gen 5 set, and every single Gen 5 Pokemon is getting its own illustration rare. That's a bunch. And in this video, we're going to look at every single one of them and talk about them. Originally, I was going to rank them, but ranking over 100 cards was difficult, especially when you're trying to compare art pieces, so this is in no particular order. Let's start with Snivy. It's a pretty good example of what you would expect from an illustration rare. Nice and colorful, nice artwork, vibrant. Same thing with Servine, very colorful, nice progression of that scenery, nice and leafy, vegetatious. And now a Pokemon that I don't like. I hate the Monkey Trio, but I will say I do like the artwork here for Pansage. Nice and playful. I really like when Pokemon cards aren't just like, here's a Pokemon and look how pretty the background is. I like when you get to see sides of Pokemon that aren't necessarily going to come out otherwise. So you get to see a little movement. These are some dynamic Pansages, not just static artwork. You get some personality, and you kind of get to learn about how a Pokemon interacts with its environment. I am not a fan of the Semi-Sage artwork. This style of artwork pops up every now and then within the TCG, and I don't know if it's always the same artist. It's not an artist that I follow, but this reminds me a lot of that Drowsy card that blew up for absolutely no reason because of buyouts and stuff. It's not for me. I can appreciate the style of art, but a little just like too disorganized, I guess. Petilil, I guess, is one of those examples I'm giving where it's just, here's the Pokemon and here's a pretty background. But, you know, Petilil doesn't really have a complete face, so it's hard to show it being expressive or interacting with its environment in an odd way. So, like, it's a good looking card, just not one of my favorites. Lilligant is much better because it's surrounded by these Petilils, and you don't just have the pretty flowery environment, but you see that a lot of these Petilils, they're surrounding the Lilligant. They kind of look up to it. It adds a bit more of beauty to the Pokemon, since that's one of its core themes. Maractus is a little derpy. It's out there having fun in the desert, but again, this is not one of my favorites. I do get down with the Carablast. I don't entirely know what's going on here. It looks like there's a dock, and there's one of those things that you tie the ropes around on the dock. Then there's some ships around. Carablast is just screaming for some reason. I like it. I like the layout and the design of the card. It's a little bit confusing, but this is something similar to what we saw with the Paldea Evolved Magikarp that I really liked, where you have these lines contrasting with pure black that have all of these different color ranges going on in them. It reminds me of one of those art sets you get where you just like slowly chip away at this black and it unveils this big picture. I'm not sure if that's the inspiration, but that's what I get from here. I also really like this Fungus. It's not doing much, it's kind of just sitting in a tree, but there's a lot of little details to look for. The different types of mushrooms here, the different types of plants, just the detail that goes into the side of the tree there. And then you kind of got this mysterious looking dark forest fungal background thing going on. The Fungus isn't doing very much, but I do like the card. Amoonguss is one that I had to stare at this for a little while to really figure out what was going on. And I think I finally got it. I think this is more of like an aerial view. There's some Amoongusses going through kind of like a bog. You know how you get that layer of like algae or vegetation on top of water that's very fertile, but it's been sitting there. Seems like they're moving through like a shallow pool of that. As they move, you know, the vegetation or the moss or whatever's parting, you can kind of see the trail that they've moved through there, which is, it's interesting. I don't know that I've ever seen that on a card. And then even just the perspective that they're getting for Amoonguss. One of the core themes of this Pokemon is it's a mushroom, but the top of it looks like a Pokeball. And so they're playing that up because it's giving you that aerial view. You get to see a few that look like the Pokeballs. and then you have one that's staring directly at the camera. Victini is definitely a Pokemon I want to hear some feedback from you guys for, because from what I can tell, this is an extremely popular Pokemon in Japan. It's a popular Pokemon with people that were kids when Black and White first released. But outside of that, I never hear anybody talk about Victini. I don't know that anybody cares about Victini in the West. I didn't even know that Victini had little wings on its butt until I was looking at this card. I was like, oh, well, I guess I never really paid attention to this Pokemon. Gen 5 is, I was in college at the time, didn't have a ton of time to play games, and so I kind of skipped Gen 5. I didn't play those games until after X and Y had released. But yeah, Victini, I know this is one of the most popular cards over in Japan right now, but I, I don't know. I guess this is a good time to throw in some speculation too. Is the Pokemon Company releasing this Black and White set now because not only did they need to fill some space in their schedule, but they went, oh yeah, the kids that were kids whenever Black and White released, they're in their 20s now. They probably have a little bit of money to spend. They want to get in on some of this Pokemon hype that is at the highest it's been in a long time. Darumaka, this is definitely one of my chase cards for the set. I'm definitely going to be trying to collect every single illustration rare, but among those, there are some that, like, man, not only do I want that in a binder, I think I might actually want that graded too. Darumaka is based on a Daruma doll, and I have one in my living room right now on a shelf next to some Lego botanical sets, and it looks so similar to this. I just love the coloration. You can tell that while this Darumaka's sleeping, like the sun's going down outside the window, it's just a very nice, calming, vibey card. And then we have Darmanitan, which is one of those dynamic cards that I like to see. You get to see this Pokemon swinging around. It's got the little Darumakas following its coattails. You got the berries falling out of the trees here. You get a good idea for how this Pokemon behaves out in the wild. Similarly, we got this Litwick where you get some nice spooky vibes. It's the art style, it's the setting. You get the Litwick there on top of this stone wall with the vines growing around it, full moon in the background, silhouettes of these trees. Just an all-around great art piece, I think, that fits well with the vibe that Litwick is supposed to be giving off as a Pokemon. The same with Lampent, where it's inside this cathedral setting where, yeah, it's lit from the bottom, but once you get up into these higher levels, up into these dark recesses, it gets dark very quickly, and that's kind of the domain of these ghost Pokemon inhabiting these little lanterns, and you get to see them as a group just kind of floating around. And then you got Chandelure, which is kind of the opposite. This is not a spooky vibe card. It's doing some poltergeist stuff. It's levitating up all the dishes and the glassware. This was one of the first illustration rares revealed for this set, and instantly people were like, yep, that's definitely a chase card. Chandelure is one of those Pokemon that gets ragged on a lot when people are criticizing Gen 5 by being like, oh, the Pokemon, they're not even animals, they're just lamps and trash and ice cream cones. Well, it doesn't matter what it's based on if the design is there. And I really think that Chandelure has an amazing design, from the face, the colors, the choice that they went with for those flames. If you're going to turn an inanimate object into a Pokemon, I think Chandelure is one of the best examples of how to do it. And those people that criticize Gen 5 are people that also ignore things like Voltorb or Magnemite, so I don't know, get wrecked. Larvesta's got some prehistoric vibes going on. Got this volcano in the background, a lot of green and red going on here. You get that kind of primal feel from it. But yeah, just cute little Larvesta crossing a log. Always good to see one of my bug friends get some nice art love. Because Volcarona is one of my favorite Pokemon. It's one of my favorite bugs for sure. And they went all out with this artwork. I'm a huge fan. Again, when it comes down to the colorations, we go from these green and red contrasting palettes to this almost more monochromatic, where the forest and the scenery around Volcarona is gray and black, but then you see this big colorful moth just kind of floating through the forest. You have cinders coming off of it. You think that it may be this kind of mystical force in the forest, or is it, a destructive force? Is it actually about to start a forest fire here? It's a little ambiguous what's going on. It's just pretty to look at, and sometimes destruction and renewal and all of those things are also beautiful. And I think that's kind of where they were going with this card, or that's just my interpretation. I already said that I'm not a fan of the Monkey Trio. Panpour is probably my least favorite. Well, Panpour and Simipour. I don't like either of them. The artwork is nice though. Simipour's got some Monet type vibes going on here, a little lighter, a little watercolor looking type of style. But man, I just do not like this Pokemon. It's very unsettling, especially once you remember that it's just completely blind. Tympole though, oh goodness, look at this little fella. He's just chilling. He's just relaxing. He's in one of those setups where you have like one little pond pouring into another one, and yeah, he's just floating there. He's just chilling. I love a tadpole Pokemon, and yeah, Tympole, he's just sleeping. Look at them little eyebrows. Here's another example of what I'm talking about when I say that Pokemon artworks give you more of an ideal into how Pokemon behave and things that you didn't know about them. I didn't know that Palpitoad had a big long tongue that it could, whip out. Like, yeah, that's a frog thing. It makes sense that it might have that, but it's still kind of in tadpole form. But it's got this big long tongue. Just an interesting artwork here. It's almost got this kind of like spray painty vibe to it. If you've ever seen the artists that will like overlay corners of papers and basically stencilize these big elaborate spray paint artworks layer by layer. This is kind of what reminds me of that. I really like the droplets coming down on the leaves here with kind of the neon coloration. It's a nice looking card. Then we got Seismitoad. I have mixed feelings about Seismitoad. It's not one of my favorite designs. And also, I have such a grudge against this Pokemon because of Seismitoad EX from back in the X and Y block. But I like the coloration. I like the art style here. There's a lot going on. I bet this is one of those cards that's going to look so much better in person. So I kind of understand why this is a popular card in Japan right now. I love this Tortuga. The lighting effects and you get that weird kind of like Liney Ripley thing when the sun is penetrating deep down into the water that you see across its shell there. Just very, very nice to see. And then you get some pops of color down there with some of the plants. It's exploring this, sunken city or some ruins here, which adds a little bit of lore and intrigue to the art. It's nice. Caracost is kind of an extension of that, not as colorful, but it does kind of embody Caracost as a Pokemon. It's this big, bulky, battle-ready ancient turtle, and so you might not want to make it as colorful and cute. You want to embody more of that, like, yeah, this is a sturdy battle focused Pokemon down here in the ocean. Alola Mola. There's not much to say about this card. This is one of those that really is just here's a Pokemon and here's a background. I really like Gen 5. Those are some of my favorite games, especially Black 2 and White 2. They have maybe the biggest dichotomy of designs for me, to where I absolutely love some of them and I absolutely hate other ones. One of the designs I hate is Snot Bear. Just like Cubchoo as a design, as a concept, I've never been on board with it. If you think it's cute, that's great, because here you got a card of a Cubchoo sitting, and there's also a background there. The Beartic artwork is better. It gives the Pokemon itself a little more to do. I like the art style here a little more, but again, just it's a polar bear. It fits really well with those other Arctic designs where you're just like, yep, that is a seal. Diagonal card is almost more about the scenery than the Pokemon itself, too. I like that it is in center view there, and then you have this expanse of tundra going on around it. You get all the icicles. This reminds me a lot of in Legends Arceus. The snowy region of the map you get to go to, that's very reminiscent of what we're seeing here. The Pachirisu is nice. This is one of the Gen 5 designs that I really enjoy. This squirrely Pika clone just running through the trees here. I realize that sometimes it's harder to pull personality out of certain Pokemon, especially ones like Cryogonal, where you're just like, well, what do you do to make it seem more dynamic or to give it some personality? And sometimes it's okay to have the Pokemon in the center of the screen as long as the environment's doing the storytelling for you. And I think that's what you get out of Tynamo here, where the Tynamo is just chilling. It's just swimming in this kind of like, little pool in a cave. But you have the waterfall behind it. You have the drops hitting the water around it. And the art style itself, while simple, It's very colorful, and it really does a lot of the storytelling of like, oh yeah, this Tynamo, it probably lives like deep down in this cave. Not a lot of light hits there. You can kind of see that from these shimmers coming down and hitting the droplets as they fall. This is a card that I really like. Tynamo, not one of my favorite Pokemon, but this brings so much more to it than I kind of previously gave it credit for, because it just kind of looks like a little sperm fish. But when I can look at the artwork and kind of add my own story to it, that makes me like the Pokemon a little more. Electric is not hidden down in a cave. It is in somewhere very colorful, almost like deep down in some type of an abyss that it's coming out of, the big crack in the seafloor. But you do have the colorful sea plants around it. You've got some bubbles coming off of the electric itself that adds a little bit, it makes you feel like you're actually deep down in there with the electric, as opposed to a lot of times with these other, water-based Pokemon, the art will be underwater, but you don't feel like you're underwater, because they miss out on some of like these bubbles and other effects that happen along with that. But this is more reminiscent of like actual underwater photography, which is nice to see. And then you have this Electros where the art's not bad, but it does feel boring compared to its pre-evolutions that we just looked at. Like, yeah, it's out of the water, it's doing something, it's got some things going on, but I don't think it's as dynamic or interesting as the Electric or the Tynamo. Munna, the floral pattern Pokemon that we had teased all the way back in Gen 1. Munna is about dreams. I think that comes across here. Even if you don't know anything about this Pokemon, it does seem very dreamlike or fairy-like, because you have this magenta sky behind it with the crescent moon. It's kind of overlooking these two Pidovs that are sleeping. I think that this card encapsulates the theme of what Munna is about. Gives it a little more context, like, oh yeah, it's floating around, it's got these sparkles behind it. That's an interesting touch that I don't know if I've ever seen from this Pokemon before. And then you get a similar thing with the Musharna, where there's almost this ethereal vibe or aura to Musharna, as it's just kind of floating in this dream state out in the woods somewhere. It's got these little lights surrounding it, and it gives it a I just can't think of a better word to describe it other than like ethereal or mysterious. Solosis is fine. I don't really have much to say about this one. It's Solosis in a field. Love this Duosion though. Just the brush effects and all the different shades of green and blue that you get. Not only, with the water moving behind it, and you kind of get that sense of movement from the brushstrokes, but also on the Duosion. Duosion's a Pokemon that's covered in this jelly stuff. It's based on a cell that is in mitosis, in the process of mitosing. And you kind of get that gelatinous feel just from looking at Duosion. Just looking at the artwork, you can tell that it is encased in this thing that's surrounding it, and the way the light is hitting it and moving through it is very nice. I'm always impressed when artists are able to pull off that kind of effect, especially with the techniques they're using. But even with this nice scenery behind it, the Pokemon itself kind of pops off the card a bit. Reuniclus is out in the street. It's having a good time. Or is that what's happening? Or is this like out in the woods in the snow? Okay, yeah, at first glance, I completely misread what was happening here, but it's got the Duosians and the Solosis around it. They're a happy little family. Not as much going on here as I would like. This is another one of those where you've got the Pokemon, and then you just have a big background around it. And in this case, it's kind of empty and lacking in personality. LGM is one of those Pokemon that I do feel it's hard to pull personality out of, because it's just a little UFO design with some eyes on it. Here they've kind of done their best, and they're showing it being playful with this background, but it's just another one of these illustration rares that's just, here's a Pokemon, and then here's a beautiful background around it. BEM is better, I think. It's still another one of those cards where it's, here's the Pokemon, here's some scenery, but the scenery is all mechanical, and the color palette matches what's going on with BEM, so it gives off more of an industrial vibe, more of a powerful vibe to BEM than we saw with LGM. So I think this tells more of a story about the types of environment where you would find this Pokemon and where it kind of feels most intimidating in this very narrow mechanical alleyway. Golett, at immediate glance, you go like, oh, this little guy's, he's putting in some work. He's carrying this boulder around down in these underground ruins. He's stopping at this little terrace, little pedestal, just look out and survey over these ruins. It adds a bit of curiosity and wonder to something that also does not have a complete face. This is essentially a chunk of rock with two square eyes, but even just posing it this way, giving it that rock over its shoulder to show that, it's probably in the middle of doing something, but it paused to have a look over this territory, this area. It does so much for a card's artwork when the environment and the pose of the Pokemon just tells the story, and then use your imagination to fill in the rest. Maybe you came to completely different conclusions than I did, but even though this is a card that is, here's a Pokemon, the majority of the card is just the setting. The pose of the Pokemon and the setting do more for the card than a lot of other ones that I've already compared it to. But the Golurk embodies more of what I like from an illustration rare, where it's not just, here's Pokemon, here's a beautiful background. I like the Pokemon to take up the majority of the card. Even if it's just doing something as simple as strutting through a field, you get Golurk's whole thing just from seeing this freeze frame of it strolling through the field. And you also get this interesting perspective from down in the grass looking up at this Golurk, which gives you a sense that this is a big Pokemon. It's not just taking up space on the card, but from where you are down in the grass, it's a big boy. It is a golem, and you get that from this artwork to where, yeah, it's just walking, but from its stance and the way it's built, you can tell that this is an artificial being that is meant to be a protector of a town or a city. Drillbur's okay, very storybook-esque, jumping from one hole to another. Now we get into another one of the evolution lines that I really don't like, and that doesn't mean that I can't appreciate the artwork. I think that the timber here, it looks interesting. It's dynamic, it's on the job site, it's helping build things. It's a construction worker. What I don't like about this evolution line is it's one of those that just has an accessory for no reason. Like, I get that a timber can go get a piece of plywood and carry it around. What I don't understand is when it evolves, where does it get that girder? It's just there upon evolution. And yeah, this is something that Pokemon's been doing for a long time. When a Machop evolves, it gets underwear and a belt from somewhere. But I do like the artwork. I like the personality of the two girder. They're hanging out, they're flexing, they're showing off these big pink veins that they have. Was another reason I don't like this evolution line. And also just because of their big red noses. I don't know what was going on with the design team. I would love to see all of the beta designs for Timber, Girder, and Conkeldurr. But, the artwork looks good. I'm just not a fan of the Pokemon, so it's hard for me to get invested in what's going on here. I didn't watch the black and white anime enough to really know how a lot of these designs play out in practice, but, does Conkeldurr, does it just always have these concrete cylinders in its hands? It just always... Does it attack with them? Is that just part of its stance? I don't understand this Pokemon line. This artwork here, I like the color palette a lot. I like the pose that Conkeldurr has here, where it's looking up at the girder at work. It's feeling like an elder. It's like, oh, these youngins are coming along. I'm proud of what we've accomplished here on this work site. Funnily enough, I always get Sock and Throw mixed up, and I can't remember which one has which name. It's funny because Throw literally has a T on its face to let me know that that's Throw. I can kind of take it or leave it with both of those Pokemon, but I do like the artwork here out in this little bamboo grove. Oh, and this Dwebble, another one of my bug bros. This gives me big Gullah Gullah Island vibes. If you know what Gullah Gullah Island is, then I hope someone gave you the aspirin you need for your lower back today. This Dwebble card, man, I love it. I love everything that's going on here. I kind of like the simplicity in the design. You do get some pops of color, but Front and center, you have the Dwebble looking into this bottle, seeing its own distorted reflection. Just very cute. And then Crustle with this look of determination as it serves as a bridge so that the little Dwebbles can get across this terrain, putting that giant block of earth on its back to good use. Just again, some great storytelling going on here. I wish there was more going on towards the bottom of the car instead of just being sand, but it does allow the focus to be on the rock bridge that the Crustle is creating, so I'm still a big fan of this one. And this Landorus, man, this is maybe among some of my favorites out of this set, because the Pokemon's front and center, it's power posing, you have all of this storytelling going on around, and you have so much movement where you have all of these plants and tree roots and vines and the earth kind of just exploding underneath of Landorus, and you get this nice V shape. It's coming up around the Pokemon itself. It's very nice artwork. I'm excited to see this one in person to see how it actually pops off. And Venipede, yet again, another amazing bug. If you hadn't assumed already, one of the reasons I love Gen 5 so much is it is the best gen for bugs. I love the bugs in this gen. They actually made them good. They made them unique. And the Venipede here, it looks nice. It's kind of minding its own business going through the forest here. A bit guilty of being one of those. It's just like, here's a little sample of the Pokemon, and then here's some stuff around it. So thankfully, that improves with Whirlipede. Because with this one, you really understand what this Pokemon is about. Not only is it front and center, but it's also rolled up, it's moving. If you've seen Donphan from the first Pokemon movie, you understand exactly what's going on here. Venipede is just rolled up. They're spinning along, they're racing. There's multiple here. You can see all the little pebbles that they're kicking up. You get the movement lines from the blurred backgrounds there. It's a great card. And then Scolipede, looking chunky here. My favorite bug horse, looking like the king of the forest here. Just very imposing, a little bit intimidating. You got the kind of the dusk colors going on in the background. Just the look that this thing's giving. I don't know that Venipede is canonically this bulky, but it does invoke, like a real fat grub when you see it. But if that grub was also huge and dangerous. Now, we've seen Sandile art like this before, where, it's kind of swimming through the sand. You normally see it from like a top view, with just the eyes sticking out. But this goes a bit further, and it goes, well, let's pretend that the sand is transparent, like water would be. We're going to treat this desert as if it's a big pond or a lake, and give you also the under sand perspective of not only this Sandile, but also another one that's just chilling in the background. This is, it's a unique take that I'm not sure I've seen before. Like I said, we've seen this type of art before, but not necessarily this perspective. This is a lot like something you would see more with like a Feraligatr. And then the Krokorok gives you more of an idea of what this Pokemon is about. It's above the sand. It's a little more boisterous. It's more about posing and being cocky out in the desert. And you get the nice sunburst with the rays shooting out behind it, just to add a little more personality. Crocodile's the same way. It's out here just power posing. This time it's on top of this junked car by the side of the road, which is really cool. I love the art design here, and just the style. I don't even know what you would call this. It's a little bit reminiscent of like Ken Sugimori, like that like watercolor style, but not quite. You get those highlights along the tail there, along the snout, that help the dark parts of the Pokemon, especially it's the sunglass-esque markings around Crocodile's eyes there. But yeah, it also just adds a little bit of environmental storytelling where, like, yeah, this is the environment that this Pokemon thrives in. It's like out in the desert where other things don't survive. If your car breaks down, it's just stuck there forever and becomes a property of this big desert crocodile. Here we have Volibee hanging out in its skull diaper, overlooking, probably the same desert that we've already been looking at. Looking out and just being like, this will be all mine. You see that look of determination in its eye. And, this is another one where you don't have to do much, as long as the Pokemon has an interesting pose. And you can kind of see the direction that its perspective is taking on the environment around it. The storytelling comes from your own imagination. And then we have this motherly Mandibuzz with the sun setting behind it. It's, on this giant brambly nest with a look of kind of contentment of this is more of, this Pokemon knows it has ownership of the skies now. It's evolved up from that Volibee that was just wishing to get out there. This is the realized version of that. And I like when they do show Pokemon with some environmental things to them. You don't always think of bird Pokemon as having nests, because when you see them in the anime or in the games, they're just there. They're just out and about. But they do have to roost somewhere. They do have to have a home. And for this Pokemon, it's this giant nest out in the desert. Escavalier it's a good looking card. I like the artwork. There's not much going on here for me to talk about other than yay, another bug. Pawniard's been out here practicing its skills. It's been cutting up some rocks. It's a little beat up itself, but it is proud of what it has accomplished. Cut to Bisharp, who is in the middle of a territorial dispute here. These two Bisharps are duking it out to see who the leader of the community is going to be. We have all of these Pawniards gathered around watching this battle happen. It's kind of a great card across the board. It's got the Pokemon front and center. It's got a lot of storytelling going on. You learn about how this Pokemon behaves in its natural habitat just by looking at this one piece of artwork. This Cobalion artwork is very reminiscent of what we normally see with a Suicune, where more of an Arctic icy vibe going on, staring off into the distance. There's some aurora going on in the sky. It's not a bad artwork. I just feel like it's something we've seen plenty of times before with other legendaries. I like the palette and a lot of the color contrast that's going on with the Axew, but I feel like aside from that, there's not much going on here. Fraxure fixes that because the card artwork here, I just think all around much better. The Pokemon itself is more of the point of the card and not just the environment around it. You have Fraxure stepping into the footstep of its evolution, which is very symbolic. You also see in the expression of the Fraxure there, it's imagining what it's going to be like to be bigger and more powerful. Then when we get to its evolution in Haxorus, we see almost I get a little bit of photorealism out of this, to where just the way the light is hitting the Pokemon in that pose. It reminds me a bit of when you have those dinosaur books and they try to recreate what they think that dinosaur would have looked like in its environment. Instead here we have this bipedal dragon down in the mines, standing on the track, blocking your way. I'm not the biggest fan of Haxorus, but if you are, I bet this card's doing it for you. Pidove is another excellent example of how you do an illustration rare. With the Haxorus, the Pokemon's taking up the whole card, and that's amazing. You get to just enjoy the design of that Pokemon itself. With Pidove, it doesn't have a super advanced design, but part of the design is, it's a pigeon. Pigeons are always in groups of other pigeons, so if you're going to do an illustration rare and you want to show this Pokemon in its environment, the sidewalk, then you put it with a bunch of other ones. If the Pidove itself isn't taking up the majority of the card, the flock of them are. And this one I think is extra cute because you have all of these sleeping Pidove, and then the one in the middle that's aware that you're taking the picture, or of the artist, drawing the scene here, just derpily smiling at you, looking up. And you evolve up into the Tranquil, which almost has a Studio Ghibli style and vibe going on. You have this grass in the foreground, but then you have these two bird Pokemon just having fun, doing bird things. And then some very sweet artwork for what I feel is a very unpopular Pokemon. In this Unfezant artwork, we see a male Unfezant and a female Unfezant, and he's leaning down and just giving a little kiss, just a little peck, if you will. It's just another one of those cards that shows off sides of Pokemon that you wouldn't normally think about, because they are pocket monsters. We're normally battling them, but they also just have lives like any other animal out in the world. Why do they build nests? We don't know, because Pokemon don't breed like animals do. They just build friendships and then eggs appear out of nowhere. So when it comes to this style of card, I think that these can be very hit or miss depending on the Pokemon depicted and the scene that they set up for it. In this case, this has to be one of my least favorite illustration rares out of the entirety of Black Bolt and White Flare. Part of it is because I don't think Audino is a very interesting design to work with this crochet style. I think if you've seen Wigglytuff, Clefable, and Chansey, then conceptually you already know what Audino is. It's not a great design, and clearly I'm not a fan of it. I'm not a fan of this particular artwork either. It just doesn't evoke any type of reaction from me other than like, oh yeah, it's another one of those. Minccino's very cute, very atmospheric. I like the early autumn vibes going on here. The Cinccino makes me realize some things about this Pokemon that I didn't before, in that it kind of embodies the feeling of, you know, having a hot cup of coffee and curling up on the couch with a good book. Like, if you made that into a Pokemon, that's kind of what this design is. And I didn't really realize that until they put them right next to each other. Those are the Black Bolt illustration rares. Now let's look at the special illustration rares, starting with Serperior. These are the ones that I think are going to be the big chase cards. Almost every single one of them, I think, is going to play into what people love about the black and white games. This Serperior artwork in general, it just looks really good. You got the beams of light coming down behind it. You feel like it just stopped raining. The sun is just starting to come out again, peek behind the dark clouds, and you have this regal snake hanging out. I feel like Kyurem is an underappreciated legendary, especially in black and white, because the other two dragons greatly overshadow its importance and its role in the story. But I think this SIR does it justice. You know, it's chilling in the cave. It's waiting for somebody to come along. It's almost frozen in place. And even though it's not moving, you still get the idea of this is something important. This is something intimidating hanging out in this cave. And you have these big jutting spears of ice, the icicles coming down. This Zekrom is definitely going to be in a lot of lists for the best cards in this set. Just the amount of power this thing is exuding, coming down out of the sky with the lightning. You have this big black Pokemon coming down, but also, you know, you have the yellows of the scenery below it, and you can almost see the curvature of the earth there. But then once you get up into the sky where this Pokemon is positioned, you have the blues and the greens and the whites coming off of that lightning, contrasting with the black clouds that are also surrounding it. This is going to be a very pretty card. The same thing with Meloetta here, just great color choices. You have all of these autumnal colors going on. You get the idea of an early evening, and Meloetta's out here singing. It does a lot of things right by having a popular Pokemon positioned in the forefront of the card, letting it take up most of the art and letting everything around it accent what the Pokemon is doing. Surprisingly, Excadrill gets an SIR, which is nice. I don't know that this Pokemon gets a ton of love, but it's a great Pokemon in game as well as competitively, so I'm glad it did get some nice art treatment here where, yeah, the Pokemon is at the forefront, but like what draws my eye is the detail in a lot of these stones that are around it. And yeah, you know, you get the feel of Excadrill has done all of the work in digging this tunnel and breaking up all of this rubble. And the design of Excadrill itself isn't super complicated, but you do get so much detail around it that I do like this. I know I'm not ranking these cards in any particular order, but this Genesect is probably my favorite card in the entire set. It's a bug, yeah, but also just the artwork here and the design, the setting. It reminds me instantly of a multitude of mecha anime, you know, Evangelion or Gundam, where you can almost hear the psh of the door sliding back, and then just in this hangar with the giant red lights behind it, you see this metal bug just poised and ready to be launched or, you know, sent into battle. I like the scenario and the storytelling that is set up here. I do believe this is my favorite card from Black Bolt and White Flare. Okay, we are halfway through this review of all the illustration rares. That's all the illustration rares and special illustration rares for Black Bolt only. So before we get into White Flare, let me get recharged with a little drink of coffee here. That's nice. and discuss a little more about why I think we have a black and white set just at the tail end of Scarlet and Violet for no reason. It can't be just because Pokemon wanted to do a special set and they said, wow, 151 was great. What if we did Gen 5 instead of Gen 1? I don't think that was the case at all, though it may have been, because this is all just wild speculation. My thoughts are that there was a planned black and white remake set to release around this time period. Because, we don't have a whole lot of Pokemon stuff going on game-wise right now. And now would have been a good time to revisit something that people already liked. Pokemon games tend to work in this cycle where when they release, oh, this is the worst Pokemon game ever released, we hate this, it'll never be as good as blah, blah, blah. And then give it 10, 15 years, you start to see people change on it and be like, man, Gen 5 was the best. It's going to be hard to top Black and White 2. No game has ever done what Black and White 2 is. And I'm kind of guilty of that too. Whenever I played through Gen 5 for the first time, I was like, I like this. I don't know that it's my favorite though, because we also had 3D Pokemon at this point. And then as time has gone on, the game that I go back to the most is Black 2, White 2. Not only because you have that challenge mode, you get a little more out of it, but just something about the Pokemon designs, the city designs, the map. There's just something about Unova that I like. And I don't think that these remakes got very far into development before they were stopped and resources were allocated elsewhere. Because I think around the time that this game would have been in early development would be around the times that Scarlet and Violet were releasing, that Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl were releasing, and a lot of immediate negative feedback was hitting the Pokemon companies. Like, you released games that barely run on this system, that have a ton of other problems, that are just not very interesting or innovative. People really did not like the chibi designs in Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl. And I think they took that feedback and they said, okay, well, this Black and White remake, what we have planned right now, is not going to work. So let's put a pause on that. Let's make sure that, Gen 10 is where it needs to be, because this is the 30th anniversary game and we cannot fuck this up. So I think at one point there was going to be a Black and White remake. This would have been a great set to tag along with that, but it kind of got scrapped or put on hold. But because the Gen 10 game or any other games they had planned kind of got pushed so that they could reallocate resources and make sure that they were actually good and playable and that people might like them. The TCG schedule would have also had a hole in it had they removed this. But I think it's easy to rework as a specialty set and just go like, oh yeah, it's going to be like 151, but it's Gen 5 Pokemon. And we're going to have a whole bunch of illustration rares that keep people interested, while we also try to, pad out these mega sets and prepare for Gen 10 30th anniversary. If we ever find out if this was the actual case, it will be a long time. And so, that's just my opinion on it. Let's jump into the White Flare illustration rares. Starting with my favorite card from White Flare. So starting strong, Sewaddle. Yeah, it's a bug. It's a cute bug. I like the concept and design of this Pokemon evolution line so much. And Sewaddle is an unsung hero of Black 2, White 2. You can encounter it and catch it on the first route out of your starting town, and you are up against so many Psychic and Dark types early on in that game that you can just sweep with some bug type moves. In this artwork in particular, the color palette is so good. It's very cosmic almost, but you have your Sewaddle on this stump. It's looking up at the little dewdrops coming off of the apples. This is maybe fresh after a little rain shower. You also see the droplets dripping off of some other leaves and flowers surrounding the stump. But just this also look of awe from the Sewaddle. It just, is it looking at the apple or is it looking at the droplets coming down? Who knows? It's just very cute and I want it. Swadloon's in the same type of environment, not as vibrant, but kind of just see this Pokemon hanging out here. What I really like about Swadloon is the expression it constantly has on its face of like a little emo kid that really wants love, but it's also not going to let you give it. And then you just get this Leavanny that's looking content as hell, hanging out, making clothes for the Swaddles and the Swadloon. Swadloon still being a little emo kid, self-reflecting in this pool of water. I like that the pool of water makes up the bottom of the card, and you even see the reflections of some other Pokemon flying from up above. You get a couple of different perspectives here that are all very nicely packed into one artwork. The Cottonee is almost floating right off the card. I like the contrast that the Pokemon itself has to the background to make it look like it is kind of like coming out of the card. Also have that same type of, dark outline and contrast on the flowers there in the foreground, which is really nice to see. Deerling is in a setting and a pose that I don't know that I've ever seen this Pokemon in. It's kind of floating in this stream. I like that the stream and the ripples going across, emanating from this little waterfall, are also taking on a lot of the green of the forest around it, and it really works well with the two Deerling that are just kind of floating in here. Also got a Sleepy Sawsbuck in a storybook kind of style artwork. I really like the little bits of light that are shining down through the treetops, and you get to kind of see that and understand where in its environment exactly this Sawsbuck is sleeping without having to see the whole widespread environment. You get this nice up close snapshot. This Shelmet is drinking out of a garden hose. Like, is that really what's going on here? Now, we've got like this little backyard garden. You see some of the accessories, and then you have more of these. I don't want to be negative on the art style, but almost like a like a child drawn setting where you see like the pole that the hose is hooked into, and then like the mailbox and the door in the back. The perspective is a little weird on it, but that's also the way that like a kid would draw a backyard setting. So I'm not trying to say anything bad about the artwork. It's not necessarily for me, but it's good to have different types of art and different takes within the set if you're going to have this many illustration rares. A Selgor is nowhere near a backyard. It is out deep in the forest or this jungle doing its best brooding imitation of Batman or Spawn. It's being a little bug ninja up in the treetops here. Much like the Cobalion that we looked at, this Virizion card isn't doing much that we haven't seen before, which is a little underwhelming for a legendary, especially one as popular as Virizion. But it's still a nice little snapshot. You see this Virizion grazing on this little hilltop up in the forest, while the audience is viewing it kind of from back in the brush behind a tree. I can see the Tepig line being one of the most popular out of this entire set based on the artworks alone. The Tepig rolling around in these autumn leaves is just adorable. Also going with the autumn vibes, we have the Pignite chilling here in this orchard eating what I think are some yellow apples. You get the idea that it's helped its trainer pick all of these apples in the orchard. They're all boxed up. You got the hat to the side over there, and now it's just enjoying a little bit of the spoils at the end of the day. And then you finish off with this Emboar artwork that looks like it probably should have been in battle styles, where, a lot of the Pokemon in there, it would show them in, martial arts style poses. And this Emboar, it's up in the mountains. It's got its fiery fists going on, just doing its, a martial arts pose in front of an active volcano, which is very fire type. I've already said multiple times that I don't like the monkeys, but I really like this card. There's something about it. Just the pose of the Pokemon itself and the shape of the fruit, all of the reds and greens going on here. I really like this card. But not so much the Simisear. I'm not really a fan of this one. Heatmor has a bit of the Pokemon lore and storytelling built in, where this Heatmor is looking to just blaze up some Durants. It looks like it's going to fire some into this stump with its flamey tongue. While you also have this Durant hiding over in the bushes, just kind of scoping out the whole situation, probably pissed that this Heatmor is about to destroy its home or some such. I know that Heatmor and Durant aren't super popular Pokemon, but I always like when they get depicted with this rivalry going on. Same thing with Zangoose and Seviper. We've seen a lot of desert and forest and stream settings so far. What we haven't seen a ton of is like a tropical setting, and that's what Oshawott gets to do here, sleeping in this hammock overlooking this shoreline with very Hawaiian looking flowers floating around as the waves come crashing in gently. This is another one that I think is going to be a very popular, very sought after illustration rare from this set. And then you got Do What now over here, just practicing, it looks like, honing some of its skills above this pool. You know, it's got, you see it in the middle of a pose. You can tell exactly what's going on here just at a glance. You have all of these suspended rings and pieces of wood around it. You even have your action lines surrounding the Pokemon itself. Very dynamic pose here. The Samurott being another great example of how strong a card can come across when you just let the Pokemon itself be the artwork. It's not doing anything special here. It's really just doing a Samurott stance, but you have the waves crashing up on the rock just below the artwork. Then you have all of these Wingull surrounding the background with these rainbow of light effects coming in. So the Samurott itself doesn't have to be doing anything spectacular, but everything around it tells you what this Pokemon's deal is. It's just doing a pose, but it's a strong pose on this shoreline. Once again, another card that I think is going to be very popular. This Basculin is another one of those where it's like the Pokemon barely takes up space and all the stuff going on around it is more interesting than the Pokemon itself. So I don't know. I think Basculin kind of got done dirty here. Ducklett, however, they went all out on this one. You get this nice underwater perspective of all these ducklets kicking around. You get some of the underwater vegetation there in the foreground, but your eye is just drawn upwards towards all of these ducklets just doing their thing. This is spectacular artwork, some of the best. Just in the way that the ducklet gives you an idea of what just everyday life is like. For a ducklet, we also see it in the Swanna, where we see them flying in formation over this body of water here, as a stork goose kind of thing would do. Here we see a little Vanillite blowing cold air out into what looks like an already frigid environment. I know that this evolution line is one of the ones that get the most flack in Gen 5 for, oh, it's just an ice cream cone. Well, the Pokemon is the ice underneath, and then the snow that accumulates on top just happens to look like an ice cream cone. I think when you start to layer in a bit of the lore like that, it helps, but at the end of the day, like, yeah, it is an ice cream cone. If you don't like it, then that's fine. Vanillish continues to blow out cold air, I guess making the snowstorm even worse. I like the little cabin in the background. That's probably my favorite part of this card. And then Vanillux just goes real hard. You get to see the Pokemon like in a sleepy, snowy town, just enjoying the storm going on outside. You get more of the frigid breath coming out of the straw, I guess is what you would call it on this Pokemon. But I really like the contrast of these like dark houses, cabins in the background with the light coming out of the windows, illuminating the Vanillux from below as it's just out there having a good time in the snow. A lot of watery reflections in this set. We see the Blitzel that's kind of wading through this stream looking for something, but we see its reflection coming through, and because it also looks like the sun is setting, the reflection is darker than the Blitzel itself, so it's almost like this shadow of the Pokemon we see in the forefront that is illuminated by the light. It's a nice looking card. The Zebstrika, on the other hand, this thing is just galloping along the shoreline. You get to see the foamy edge of the waves coming in, and also the particles of water that are flying up as this Pokemon moves along. Zebstrika is also an electric Pokemon, so it makes sense that it's out there doing this during a big storm. You can see the lightning crashing in the background, hitting the horizon, the top of the ocean, and almost that reflection, that line across the ocean that goes all the way out from that horizon line up to the shore, where you can see even there, that silhouette of the rock and the water crashing against it, illuminated by the lightning behind it. There's a lot of intriguing stuff going on here, but even with all of that, my mind's kind of just drawn to like the shininess of the Zebstrika. I didn't know that this was a shiny Pokemon. I'd imagined it to be more like furry, like a horse or a zebra would be. So I don't know, I'm a little entranced. Now it's portrayed here a little more than this whole stormy beach setting that's going on. Thunderbug on a lamp. This is another popular one in Japan right now. I can see why. Very cute, very interesting setting. All around great card. Galvantula is out here being an electric Spider-Man, other than Miles Morales, that is, but just up on a skyscraper wall here. Big electric web. Interesting looking card. I like this one. Stunfisk. No notes. Perfect. Perfect illustration rare. Woobat with the grainy outlines. I like this art style. It's pushing Lisa Frank, but not too far in the Lisa Frank direction to where the environment shines, the Pokemon gets to shine. Good looking card. And then with these Swoobat, get to see something I haven't seen before. I knew that the Swoobat sonar effect was heart shaped because their noses are heart shaped, but I never really seen two Swoobat communicating with their heart shaped sonar. It's very cute, especially for a Pokemon that I don't really like the design of. This artwork makes me like them a little more. Same thing for Sigilyph. I don't really like the design of this Pokemon, but this artwork is really nice. It really lets the Pokemon itself shine. This seems like the type of environment that this Pokemon is suited for, this geometric, hyper-colored kind of thing, because Sigilyph is a weird Pokemon with a weird design. Yeah, this is a great illustration rare and makes me like the Pokemon a little bit more. Yamask is a little bit generic. Like, it does have an interesting setting, but the Pokemon itself isn't doing anything interesting. This just seems like stuff we've seen before. Cofagrigus gets to be much more dynamic. Got these big shadowy hands coming out towards the viewer. The background, it's like a relief map almost. I don't really know what's going on with the background here. Maybe it's a blurred sense of perception because Cofagrigus is doing something to the space around you and is reaching out for you with these ghostly hands. But I like this card. Cofagrigus is a Pokemon that I forget about a lot, and I forget how much I like it until I see it pop up somewhere. Gothita has a fitting illustration rare, I guess. This seems like the environment that you would assume this Pokemon to be in. I do like when we get to see a more domestic side of Pokemon, you know, not just their natural environment out in the world, but also once they're domesticated. Once they're captured and brought home, what are they doing inside the house? Gothorita is the same kind of vibe. You see it jumbled up in all this laundry and just other household supplies, a big pile of clothes, maybe like they're getting ready for a trip or coming back from a trip. Got the suitcase open, all these clothes spilling out. But I do like that the focus is a bit more on the Pokemon itself. And from there, you can kind of look at the surroundings and start picking out the little details. They do this a lot with Rotom cards, and that's why I like Rotom so much. The Gothitelle is extremely interesting because they've used mostly negative space here. They have almost a fully black card with a Pokemon in the center. You got this orange moon and stars in the background. And then below the text, you see like the reflection. A lot of reflections in this set, but it works really well here because you're assuming Gothitelle is standing atop this reflective surface. It could be water, could be a big mirror, whatever it is. It expands the card. This one, I cannot wait to see in person. I think pulling this out of a pack would be an amazing finish to that experience just because of the card layout and the decisions artistically made here. Roggenrola, another example of how you can add interesting elements to a Pokemon that isn't very expressive. Something that I didn't know about Roggenrola is it can actually like dilate and expand and contract the speaker on the front of its face. You can see there's like different size and I guess that's how this Pokemon emotes and expresses stuff. But when one Pokemon isn't interesting enough, put in a whole group of them. Boldore, another Pokemon looking into the water, seeing a blurry reflection of itself. It's kind of middle of the road here. I like the art. I think in any other set, this would be a really cool illustration rare, but just compared to everything we've looked at so far, it's just kind of very middle of the road. But this Gigalith, it really stepping it up here. It's absolutely crashing onto the scene, giving this huge explosive presence, really adding some momentum, some dynamic elements to the artwork for a Pokemon that is really just a rock. It's a pile of rocks. So sometimes you have to get creative in how you show just how powerful a pile of rocks can be, and Gigalith is doing it here. I like the sock artwork so much better than the throw artwork. Sock here with the big S on its face so you can remember which one it is. But there's just something that seems more fluid about the artwork here. The perspective is nice too, where you're looking down at the sock as it's practicing on top of There's a pillar of rocks. You can see all the moving water down below it, extending out into this valley. You can kind of imagine the rest of the setting as you have, the light shining from behind Sog, giving this nice effect of like, yeah, this Pokemon, it's been up here practicing its martial arts all day. The sun is setting. A surprisingly engaging artwork for Sog. I was hoping for something more with Archon. I really like this Pokemon. I think Gen 5 has the best fossil Pokemon among any generation. Not what I was expecting. I'm not disappointed by it. Another one of these kind of storybook inspired scenes. I do like the Archeops. We've seen a lot of just vegetation and flowers and colorful leaves. I'm hoping that the set doesn't feel overloaded with just like jungle forest settings and Pokemon looking into water. I do like the pose here. I like the positioning on the card, and I can't tell if I'm being biased because of all the cards we've looked at already, or do I really like this, or is it another just mediocre entry? Mienfoo, another fighting type, just out here practicing its moves, practicing its stances. Got the little piles of rocks on its head, on its tail, on both of its paws. Just a really nice visualization of what this Pokemon's all about. Even more so on this Mienshao, which, again, I just get these like Ghibli vibes from the water swirling around the Pokemon as it's practicing. You have these little Mienfoos down here observing the techniques of their elder of their evolution. But you also have this rural China, the stacks of mountains like you always see from Dragon Ball in the background that really established the setting here. Terrakion, I feel like is a bit more interesting than the Virizion and the Cobalion that we've looked at. Just because this isn't a familiar setting, it kind of makes you wonder, like, where is this Pokemon strolling? What happened to the ruins around it? It almost gives a sense of kind of patrolling the area. So nothing too spectacular here, but it fits the Pokemon. Purloin, little kitty cat Pokemon sitting on the bed. It's got this quilt up there next to it. Got a substitution doll there too. You can kind of see outside there's a garden going on, just real like farmland. There's a farm cat kind of vibe going on here. Love the Liepard. This big old cat hanging out up in a tree kind of expands on what Purloin is as a Pokemon when it evolves in the same way that like Meowth and Persian do, where it becomes more cat-like, which is rare in Pokemon nowadays. You start with a bipedal animal, you're just going to get, some big furry bait Pokemon, but for Persian and Purloin, you both go in the opposite direction where it becomes more animal-like, more monster-like in some senses, which I enjoy. Like an actual leopard, you have this Liepard hanging out up in a tree observing what's going on below. Scraggy's fun. It's just wandering around. It's hiding some berries down in its shed pants while all the other Scraggies in the background are doing similar things, just being generally rambunctious. Very colorful, very cartoony. I really like this card. Scrafty, not as much for some reason. I just don't enjoy the art style as much. It's, you got that kind of grainy look. I do kind of like the perspective where you're looking over this railing because you get to see the bike and the park bench. A little bit more urban. Just not feeling it on this one. Trubbish, finding treasures amongst the trash. Very fitting for a Trubbish since it is trash, or at least just trash shaped. It's been foraging through this big pile of junk, but it's found one thing that it really likes, which is a little bottle. I don't know if you can actually see what's in there. Let me zoom in and see on here. You can't really see what's inside there. Potentially like a little flower or something. I don't know. We have to see on the actual card, but I like Trubbish. We see the Garbodor emerging from a tunnel, or is that a washing machine that it was chilling in? Maybe it looks like it just woke up from a nap, or it's just emerging to see what all the ruckus is out here. It's an okay card. I wish they would have gone a little bit harder on the Garbodor, since that's another Pokemon that catches a lot of flack for just being an inanimate object Pokemon in Gen 5. But I tend to like all the pollution Pokemon for some reason, all the way back to like Muck and Weezing. Now, a pair of Pokemon that they are always going to go hard on are Zorua and Zoroark. Big fan favorites, so they're always going to get some special treatment whenever they're printed in the TCG. Almost getting up to the same level as Lucario at this point, but we see the Zorua here. crossing this log, nice jungle, foresty setting, got the big moon in the background. Let's go back and do a count of how many of these cards also have a moon in the background, because it's quite a few. A lot of water and forested moons. It is just an all-around good-looking card. The Zoroark looking sly and sinister. Here by the water's edge, got some ripples going on, some nice reflective colors in the background, some pinks and blues and greens that fit really nicely against the blacks and grays of the foreground of the card there, which looks like Zoroark's hanging out on like an overturned rotting tree, and a lot of the roots, like the stump there, are at the forefront. You get into the water, you get some more coloration to contrast with the Pokemon itself, which is pretty dark. With Dino, or Dino, I don't really remember how this one's pronounced. I'm going to say Dino. We got some nice detail in the trees here. The Bramblewood here with the Dino, being a little lonely, wandering through in the background. It's another one of those where the focus is more on the setting itself, and the Pokemon is almost an extra. This card isn't exactly about the Pokemon. The Pokemon just happens to be in the artwork. A major change happened between the Dino and the Zweilous here, as it's no longer wandering the lonely woods. It's out here having a good time. It's much more colorful. It's prancing around. I'm not a huge fan of this Pokemon line. I'm very much indifferent about this one. But now this Ferroseed. Ooh, being able to see a bunch of Ferroseeds out in their natural environment doing things. They're really just existing, but whenever you see a Ferroseed in the game, it's just, it's just a seed kind of bouncing around or whatever, or just stuck into the ground, depending on which game you're playing. But in this one, you see like, oh yeah, they can stick to trees. These little steel durian guys, you can just chuck them up there and they'll stick there. That's what the spikes are for. It gives you more context for the design of this Pokemon and how it actually functions as a living thing. Same thing for this Ferrothorn. You get to see it prowling or lurking or hunting, whatever it's doing through the woods. This shows you exactly how it traverses the forest. It's also got those spikes on these tendrils that it has, and it's able to move around the forest. And the same way that those Ferroseeds were stuck to the trees, Ferrothorn can stick those spikes in the trees and use it to get from one place to another without having to be stuck into the ground because its entire body is spikes. And this adds so much to what I think about this Pokemon, because you think about it as just like chilling on the ground or being stuck into the side of something, but the fact that Ferrothorn, this thing be moving, and not just, from tree to tree, but also like way up in the treetops. So this is kind of terrifying if you were to look up and see this giant spiky steel mass imposing over you. The Klink art is okay. I really like that it looks absolutely astonished by other gears existing that aren't it as a Pokemon, that there are some non-living gears out there. I say astonished, but that's just always what its face looks like, so they at least played it very well here. Playing is also just okay. Like, yeah, the Pokemon is there. It's in an industrial environment. That makes sense. Alright. Clang is just a no-go for me. I kind of like these clay model arts whenever it's not full art. I don't think that making this an illustration rare, like the full card, actually does anything for the artwork, because there's nothing going on below where that art box would be. This Durant card is amazing. Not only do you see the entrance to the Durant Hill, but you get to see the whole system that they've carved out below too. You get to see all these different chambers and what they're using them for, seeing different Durants doing different things. You get this nice cross section, and the art style really helps that out. It's not an overly colorful card. There's no singular point that really pops out. Maybe just like the berries that are stored down in there. But just overall, your eye gets drawn to these different chambers one by one, working your way down, which is really cool. Druddigon is a Pokemon that I know almost nothing about. I have never used it in a team. I haven't watched any of the anime where a Druddigon pops up. But this artwork kind of makes me like it. I always thought it was a bit of a lazy design, because it looked like just pieces of blue and red dragons jaggedly shoved together, and then it's one of those that had the big long arms that looked, just more like a mutated dinosaur rather than a dragon. It didn't have any evolution to go with it or improve on its design. But that's really just from the pixel art I've seen on it and those, flat drawings you see in like a Pokedex guide. But this artwork gives it some personality. It adds a little bit more to, like, what is a Druddigon about besides just being a generic dragon? Patrat is fine. Watchog also just fine. Lillipup, again, another one of those Pokemon that catches a lot of flack because the design is literally just my mom's dog. So if you already know that's what people think of it, yeah, sure, play it up, have it doing household dog things, because that's really what the design is. That's what this Pokemon's all about. It literally is just your mom's dog. Sure, there are more interesting things that you can have a herdier doing, but being on the couch like your mom's dog at home, sure, why not? Howland at least gets to be outside, but it's what's it doing out there? Is it just standing? Is it just being adjacent to flowers in a field? I do like the Rufflet. This is another one of those more simplistic art styles that works. I like the framing of the card where you have the Rufflet at top. It's sitting atop this big nest. And thankfully, they put some interesting little bits into that nest so that it's not just, the Pokemon's up here and then it's, sticks. But you can actually zoom in, you can see, like there's different types of berries. There's little pieces of berries that the Rufflet has eaten. As, we're just seeing the scraps left over here. So it's a nice little touch that, a lot of times with these simpler art styles, they just come across as boring because your eyes just take in every detail all at once. There's not a whole lot of contrast going on here, so your eyes aren't moving from side to side or anything unless you pepper in some little details like those berries. Braviary is ready for Independence Day. It is all spread out there showing off its colorful spread. It is in a cool pose where you can tell it's overlooking this cliff into the water, hunting. It's looking for some basculin or whatever else these things eat. The SIRs for White Flare, I don't feel like they go as hard as the Black Bolt ones, but they're still pretty good. Like this Whimsicott is a beautiful card. I think they did a very good job here. The Reshiram bugs the shit out of me just because I've never understood with this Pokemon's design why it has to have a big spiky fur dick coming out of the front of it. Like, what? I don't understand the choices made on the design of Reshiram. That one in particular, because when you have a big glamorous artwork like this, that's where your eyes drawn to. It's just, it's got its arms out, there's some fire and whatever, but also just a big spiky fur dick. So this is not a criticism of the art as much as it is just for the Pokemon and how difficult it is to pose this thing without that being the focal point of its entire design. The Keldeo is also very visually interesting because it's almost like in the background you have a spring or summery kind of vibe. Closer to where the Pokemon is, you have these overhanging branches that have autumn leaves on them. Those are reflected in the stream below, following a trend of a lot of cards we've talked about already. But then also where the Keldeo is standing on top of the water, you get these little ripples. You get this distortion of that reflection above. And that's what I think is most interesting here, is where the artist has made these little waves that almost show a more detailed version of what's above, because you can see the individual leaves reflected, but also some of those individual leaves are on top of the water. As we can see, the leaves are falling down. They're coming down the stream. They're moving past Keldeo and where it's stationed at on top of the stream. And what we get at the bottom left-hand corner of this card is kind of a mishmash of not just the reflection from above, but the actual autumn leaves on top of the stream. You could probably put any Pokemon on this card and it would be a beautiful card, but the Keldeo is a nice contrast because it's got the orange and blues and yellows that fit well with everything else that's going on here. This Jellicent is also one of the cards I want most from this set. I think it was a genius decision to, not only just put the Jellicent underwater. That's not too big of a decision to make since they are water Pokemon that live under the water. I think the genius here is making the water dark, making it gray. Because it does take a bit away from the male Jellicent when you just have a blue jellyfish in blue water. Whatever. These are ghosts. These are ghost type Pokemon, so it makes sense to have them in darker, more sinister looking parts of the water. So instead of like the big colorful coral and things that you'll normally see with Pokemon that are seen underwater, here we see just like color washed black and gray and dark blue all across the bottom, and you get a little pop of color at the top of the water where you can kind of see like this distorted moon or some other light. But the main Jellicent here, the male one, it's not looking at the top of the water, it's looking at you. The Hydreigon is doing Hydreigon things. You know, there's a storm, it's raining, it's flying around, it's, you know, nothing I feel like we haven't seen from a bunch of other cards. A bunch of other Hydreigon cards, actually. The Bouffalant's cool. Reminds me of The Lion King when all the wildebeest are running down the canyon. You kind of get that same kind of thing happening here, but there's only 4 Bouffalants, and they're really just kind of going through this field. You can't tell. Are they coming out of a river? Maybe, it looks like. They are water buffalo, kind of, maybe, also. So it would make sense for them to be coming up out of the water and going up this ledge into the field where they're going to be grazing, whatever it is. But I think this is a surprisingly good looking card. Now we do also have the big rarity Reshiram and Zekrom. It's just I'm not impressed with this at this point, because we've seen this exact treatment for both of these exact Pokemon. We have seen the fully white and the fully black cards. You know, they have special ridging on them, they're textured, they're nice. They're just not special anymore. We also have the full art trainers of Ins Plot, Fennel, and Hilda. I think these are also going to be very popular cards. The Husbando and Waifu tax on the SIR, Ins Plot, and Hilda will be heavy. We've had a ton of N cards, but people love N, but we haven't really had a Hilda card, right? I think this is the first time Hilda showing up in the TCG, like as her own card. Now she's showing up in, like, you know, trainer gallery and stuff, but I think that's also going to drive the price up. Is if you like Hilda as a character, this is your first chance to get a Hilda card. Same thing for Fennel. I don't recall Fennel ever showing up as her own supporter, but I like Fennel. I'll be gunning for those cards regardless of the waifu tax. That was a lot of card reviewing. I'm glad we got to shotgun it here. If you are still listening to this video, then Lord bless you, and I appreciate you. I'm really excited about this set. I want to open as much product as possible, but much like Destined Rivals, it may be the case of sitting around and waiting for a while, just waiting for your big box stores to fill their shelves, or just, you know, going out on like a Tuesday morning and seeing what you can find. I hope that none of us have to wait too long, especially people that love Gen 5 that just want to collect all of these illustration rares. The majority of them are beautiful. They're incredible cards. They're great art pieces. I can't wait to systematically fill up a binder, even if it takes, you know, several years to track down all of these cards, find them at a good price, find the packs or open them out of packs. But let me know down below what your favorites are. Just give me a quick top 5. Here at the end, I know for sure that the bugs are topping off my list. The Genesect, the Volcarona, the Swaddle. I love all of them, and I cannot wait to open this set, to get them in binders, to finish off this collection, no matter how long it takes. I hope that you guys are also able to find product and enjoy this set, this part of the hobby. I think it's a great send-off for Scarlet and Violet as a block. And if you enjoy pretty cardboard, there's a whole lot of pretty cardboard in here. So, once again, thanks for watching. Stay tuned to the channel for a lot more TCG content. Moving forward, I will be featuring a lot more ultra modern collecting, as well as the vintage decks. So bit of contrast there, going back and forth between those two, but it's what I love. If you're here, I know that you love it too. I can't wait to get into more, and I can't wait to share all of that with you guys in the future. I will see you at the next video. Bye.